Okay, I hope you see the screen, the welcoming screen. Okay, this is okay. Yeah, welcome to our webinar. And to get to know what we're talking about today, here's our little agenda. So first you will get to know our two companies and why we do that webinar together. Then we will talk a lot about different challenges you will face in MT integration and also the solutions to that challenges. And yeah, and in the end, you will know how we can bring that together, how you will achieve your goals by getting the right consultancy at the start and the right technology from Tilde in that case. But first, you will get to know us, the speakers. And so I will start here. My name is Christian Eisold. I'm a computational linguist at Berns Language Consulting, where I'm mostly engaged in natural language processing, which includes preparation, training, evaluation of MT systems, data analysis, migration for translation management systems, and so on. And together with my colleagues at BLC, I provide consultancy and knowledge along the whole translation process steps to our customers.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Metuzal. I'm Client Relationship Manager at Tilde, where I work with both businesses and public administration organizations, helping them to introduce MT into everyday work.
Yes, and hello, everyone. My name is Marts Spinnis, and I am the Chief AI Officer of Tilde, and my main responsibilities are machine translation development at Tilde.
Yes, okay, so then I will go on with introducing BLC, our company here. A few words on us. We help clients to meet the demands of high or specific translation challenges with automated processes mostly. So these processes often include the optimization or establishment of terminology management processes or MT system integrations. We provide support in strategic planning and a lot of tool evaluations in order to integrate them into your workflows. So furthermore, we pass on our knowledge in client workshops, lectures, and blogs. So it is very important for our customers in the first place that we provide objective analysis and best practices from the industry without any financial ties. So there are no system sales by us, nor do we get any commissions from system providers. And that holds true for all the areas we are active in. So I will give it to Tilde then.
Yeah, Tilde has been involved in language technologies for 30 years now, developing machine translation solutions, virtual assistants, and speech technologies. And we invest heavily in research and development, which enables us to be at the forefront of technological developments and also provide to our customers those cutting-edge solutions, which also win awards at World Machine Translation Competition. And we work across different sectors in business, as you see, also across different geographies, but we also work very closely with public administration bodies, also across different countries, and they all benefit from machine translation in different ways. They use it in different workflows and different use cases, yet they all benefit in similar way by to the next slide, please, by introducing new opportunities for business, by increasing efficiency and automating translation workflows, by being faster in entering new international markets, by improving communication across different departments, particularly if those departments are located in different parts of the world where different languages are spoken. Also, it helps to better or to speed up productivity of translators and make the translation workflows more efficient, which all sums up in saving a lot of time and a lot of costs for businesses and public administration organizations, which again enables businesses to be more profitable.
Okay, so let's talk about the different challenges we face when integrating MT. But before that, I would like to remind you that you can type in your questions, of course, in the chat, and that you also provide your main challenges here in the chat, if you like, so that we can have a little feedback and that makes up for a discussion in the end. Thank you. When integrating MT, it's of course mostly important to have all the data that is relevant for your use cases, and this is the start of every process here, after having the requirements, of course. And then it comes to the specialization of engines and to know which data to use for which engines. And also the training process itself can be of various ways. So there is adaptive MT, which Marcus will explain to you later on. And a main theme of this webinar is also terminology integration. This is still a riddle for many users, so we try to shed light on this. And also it's very important to look at security requirements and issues, and at last what ways of integration are there for MT. So we start with a data challenge.
And when we talk about data, it's not only about availability of data. Even if it's available and in large amounts, it comes in different data formats, quality levels, content and text types, aligned and unaligned. So it all needs to be analyzed, processed, and looked into.
So what does it mean in detail? That means that, that the first challenge is to be able to use all the available customer data for MT training. And this includes extracting language material from a variety of formats and aligning text when they do not have a sentence by sentence mapping, which you need for MT training. The most important file types are TMX, which holds the aligned sentences of your translation memory, and TBX, which holds your terminology. Other file types can hold important data too, but in these cases, data, it's mostly parallel data, so not aligned data, and this requires semi-automatic alignment of sentences, sentence pairs first. And another issue is if there isn't enough data available on the customer side, domain-related training text from Tilde or other sources, or even other sources you don't know of, which you hold in your company, can be used, as well as web extractions of text for a specific domain. And if you've gathered all the data that might be used for your use cases and language directions you need, you have to get sure your data is ready for MT training. And in order to assure that, there are certain data cleansings to be made, dependent on the data quality. So usually there are doubles deleted and identicals, so where source is identical to target text, and we delete text or URLs in the data resources, or segments with very high amount of numbers. To sum it up, we have to assure that the engine learns only by linguistic relevant content, and all the other content that isn't facilitatable by the engines we get rid of. So, and part of this is to check the terminology if it's right in your training text, and if the spelling variants might be checked and corrected automatically. There are a lot of things that can be done automatically. Some require more manual labor, and one of that is terminology to a certain degree. So you have to be sure to have your right terminology from the start in your text. So there's a process behind it that assures that your terminology is right, but you can do a lot of afterwards, and that will Marcis explain to you later. But it's always good to have the correct terminology in your training text, of course. So be sure you do that. And anonymization is also a big area and depends on the regularities you have to follow here, and that can be done a lot by getting rid of addresses or phone numbers and the like. Yeah, and if you have your contents ready, this is a good basis for having high quality engines, because the better your data, the better the engines will be, and you can go on with customizing your engines.
So the next critical step for companies is to really decide which is the best engine for each specific business, for each specific need. And when we talk about custom MT, we can say that general systems can be good, but they are not customized for specific domains and are not familiar with terminology. Therefore, they often do not deliver desired quality our clients request. And for that, many companies do decide to go for custom MT solution.
So to understand better why you would need a custom machine translation system, we need to look at what the general domain or general systems provide. Those systems are typically trained on publicly available data, which mostly comprises of public sector data, so different laws, regulations, directives, documents of internal and external use, press releases, also public sector websites, and also data that can be scraped from the web. So news, company press releases, multilingual website content. And that does not necessarily mean that the domain or style of text that you are dealing with will be well covered within the data that is typically used to train the general domain systems. So those are typically meant to provide a general translation, a broad translation, which purpose is to inform a user or a reader of what the source text means, but not necessarily provide precise domain-specific translations. And this is why typically, if you're working on more narrow domains or one specific industry, you may need a customized system that better suits your needs. And we can help you develop a custom machine translation system that satisfies your needs based on what you have. So all the data resources that you have. Christian already mentioned types of those data resources: translation memories, text documents from which we would extract either parallel or monolingual data, terminology, named entity, glossaries, and other types of linguistic resources. The type of customization strategy that we would offer or propose to use depends on data volumes and also your specific needs. So whether you have little data, some data, or a lot of data, we may propose you either to use dynamic learning functionalities or to train a full-fledged custom fine-tuned machine translation system based on your data. And if you have specific needs to in your workflows, text creation, document processing workflows, we can also adjust pre-processing and post-processing steps in the translation workflows to better suit and integrate within your workflows. So based on what you have, we can select to either develop a fully custom neural machine translation system, to fine-tune a pre-existing engine, or even the custom NMT system that we train, to use dynamic learning if you have little data, to enable terminology integration if you work on specialized domains and you do manage terminology, or can be involved or take part in the terminology management processes. And also we typically add to machine translation systems pre and post-processing rules that address the specific needs of each specific customer. So each of those steps can increase the translation quality further and ensure that we deliver a customized system that is better tailored to what you actually need.
So if we look at the next level custom MT available, or adaptive MT, as we call it, dynamic learning at Tilde. So we can say that static machine translation systems never learn to correct their mistakes by themselves. They can be retrained, but it's not learning on fly, as we say. So meaning translators regularly need to correct the same mistakes as custom MT do not improve as we move forward from each post edit, and users feel frustrated because their feedback is not reflected in translation outputs.
So we develop dynamic learning enabled neural machine translation systems that if you have little data, can help boosting translation quality in your specific domain till you have enough data in order to train a fully fledged custom neural machine translation system. So how does the dynamic learning functionality work? So it accumulates in real time translation memories of user post edits. So when translators translate, they produce translations, which if you use a computer assisted translation tool, are sent back then to the machine translation engine, which accumulates the data in a translation memory, your own individual translation memory. And when a new translation request is received, so let's say a translator post edits a sentence, that is sent back to the machine translation engine. When the translator translates the next sentence, the previous sentence's post edit is already used to fine tune the next sentence. So the machine translation system receives this translation request. It looks up in your translation memory similar other sentences in order to fine-tune the machine translation model on the fly. So it fine-tunes the model and then translates your request and sends the translation back to the translator. And all this process happens within 1 second. So for each translation request, on average, we require just 1 second to look up similar translations, fine-tune the engine, and return the translation. So there is room or a place for a static machine translation system and also a place for a dynamic machine translation system. So what are the use cases where one or the other is useful? So imagine that you have you work typically on short texts from many different domains, which are frequently mixed. And your content that you translate is mostly novel, it does not repeat. What you translate is similar to the translation memory that you have provided us to deliver you a custom machine translation system. Then static neural machine translation is typically a better solution. However, if you translate longer projects, so let's say 100 plus sentences long, which are typically on one domain, or within the project, the domains do not mix. The content is somewhat repetitive, so you would see clauses of sentences being repeated, or if you have slight changes, let's say named entity changes within sentences. And this content is dissimilar to what the training data of the machine translation model looks like. Then dynamic learning is an asset and can improve translation quality over just the static neural machine translation models. So we have, so Tilde is also a language service provider. We also provide translations. We mostly operate in the Baltic states. Being a language service provider, we also test the technologies that we develop on our projects. And here you see an example of evaluation that we did on our own localization projects, where the dynamic learning functionality for the individual projects allows improving quality beyond the baseline static neural machine translation models.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, interesting information that might be new to a lot of newcomers to MT, of course, but also to people that already are in touch with MT training. So that is the training part here, which has a lot of flexibility here depending on the system, and terminology integration on the other side is one big part, of course, of having consistent and reliable, good terminology in your engines. And how do we achieve that? So there are a lot of questions and challenges we are facing here. The first would be how to extract terms if I don't have data. How do I build a term base, and how do I manage it? So a lot of customers that come to us just have like some Excel files, or not even that, and there is no management process behind it. And how do we achieve consistency if we have tools at hand here? And the overall workforce, of course. So what are the roles that are necessary to have a management process here, and who is able and allowed to use terminology in which system, and all that questions. And in the end, it comes to integration. How do I get my terminology into the system? And I would like to give you a short overview of the process here. So terminology integration always starts with the management process. So if you have one, so be lucky. If you don't have one, there has to be one established on your side. So first we must start with a customer present terminology. If there is no terminology or glossary present, an initial database is created using term extraction from customer texts of different departments. So that will be bilingual term extraction. So you get you get term pairs in your relevant languages that you can approve here. And in order to have a bilingual term extraction, you need sentence-aligned data that will be in the ideal case your TMX files, which contains aligned sentences, but it's also possible for parallel data, but then you have to do an alignment before that. And when you have your terms, you can start up building your term base. So you can start including the relevant terms and yeah, variants you would like to include, and you can exclude your doubles here. So you start with a clear and clean term base, and of course, the higher the volume of your terminology is, you will need software to manage it. So you have to select the appropriate tool for your use cases that is convenient for you. And we helped a lot of customers to select these tools for a terminology management process so that you can conveniently define your terminology in that system, that you can assign term statuses so that you know which term is allowed in a use case and which term is not allowed here, and that you can hold all your term variants here. And in the end, the goal of all this is to have a process behind it to maintain your terminology on a regular basis, so your employees can do term proposals. There is process for approving these terms, and so in the end, all your term translations are in a good shape here for the MT process, not only for the MT process, but for all the other translation processes and the human translation process, your CAT tools, and so on. You can even use the terminology for language checking before you translate text, of course. So let's look at the 4 steps in developing MT engines here. Just briefly, you have a pre-processing step. I told you about the data cleaning, and in this step also you decide on what to use for training and what do you for testing your engines, because you want to know how good they are. And the second step is training, where you configure your MT system. You select the right engines here. You do the customization and configuration, and if you've done all that, you're ready to evaluate the trained engines here on the basis of test sets. And after that, you can integrate MT in all the relevant channels here. And what I want to point out here is terminology is a very important part in all that step. So in pre-processing, you have to get sure that yeah, the terminology is right in the training text. You can check that here, and you can create your test set according to specific terminology that you want to test later on. In the training process, you configure the engines with the correct terminology so that the engine knows which terminology to use with which engine. And in evaluation, you finally test how terminology is translated. And in the integration, of course, you have several other systems that come in here that are using terminology. And so, for example, CAT tools and language quality assurance tools. And usually the process is you have your terminology management system. And if you want to use that in your machine translation system, you have to export the data somehow to get it into the MT system. And in some cases, you even have to transform the data to a suitable format here. And as soon as the terminology is in the MT system, this handles the translation with its methods, of course. And with Tilde, you're in the lucky place to yeah, have the management component in the system. So in that way, you can use your different domain-specific terminologies along with your engines, and you're very flexible to use your terminology in your yeah, different engines and translations. And how that is done in Tilde, Marcus will show you now.
I will tell you briefly how our latest Tilde terminology platform works and how you can use it for search. That's so fine. For search, as well as for management and creation of your own terminology collection. So this screenshot shows you the first function available, which is a search function where you can look up terms in your own specific collections you have developed, or you can also use the publicly available Euroterm Bank, which is a massive terminology bank where you can also look up different terms. And there are other functionalities integrated, such as collection management, integration, and so on. And if we move to the next slide, you will see examples of how to create and manage your own collection. So the screen on the left shows you a couple of collections, terminology collections, which have been created. You can create them in different languages, in different domains, in different subdomains, and administrate them as much as you like, add additional information, additional languages, and so on. And if you work with any specific collection, you can also look up and work with specific terms, like showed on the screen on the right side. We have taken an example of the term computer, where you can see it provides you with information about what it is, what the definition for this term is, what is the linguistic information, what are the translations in different languages we use in this specific collection. It also helps you to look up other data which illustrates this term, such as picture and video material to tell more about this data. You can also use edit functionality, where you can work on these terms, approve, disapprove, add additional information, add different other translations, and so on. And the third very useful functionality here is discussion, where you with your colleagues who are terminology administrators can work together, share views, approve, disapprove, agree on the process of terminology creation, and so on, and have very efficient tool and way of working together to create these terminology collections.
So our platform for terminology management allows to easily also manage terminology for machine translation purposes, which differs from terminology for human users. So classical terminology and most of the terminology management platforms that are meant for only human usage. So we provide two types of views. So one is the term table view and one is the empty glossary view. And those, so the term table view is meant for human users, and the empty glossary is meant to manage terminology for machine translation purposes, where you also see in the picture here that there are categories, specific categories included that are necessary to to know when we integrate terminology in machine translation systems. So those three categories are whether a term is a translatable term, so whether it has a translation in a different language, whether the case or the register is fixed or it is flexible, and whether the terms are inflectable. So whether we need to look for different inflections or just the one form should be used. Also, not all terms are typically useful for machine translation purposes. Our term management platform also ranks each term and then tells users whether it's safe to use those terms within a machine translation system or not. And if the system suggests that some terms should not be used, if you upload the terminology, it will disable them, but then each user can override the platform's decision, and if there is a need to integrate a term in the machine translation system, a specific term, then the users can override all the decisions made by the platform itself. Also, similarly to all term management platforms, each term entry can be described with all the metadata that the term-based exchange format or TBX provides. So this is additionally to the data that is necessary for machine translation purposes. When we extract terminology for machine translation purposes, we also make sure that we do not use terminology that is obsolete or not approved by users for usage. So while maintaining a term database or a term collection for human users, you can provide metadata that we use then in order to figure out whether we should use some terms in the machine translation systems or not.
Okay, thanks. And in the beginning, I told you about the data cleansing here and how terms should be correct in the training resources here, and that holds true every time. Of course, you should have the correct terminology, and the more terminology there is, the more there is for the engine to train, to learn from. But there's also another integration method that is called runtime integration, and when to use which method Marcis will explain to you now.
So as Christian said, there are two types of terminology integration methods. So one is training time integration and one is runtime integration, and they differ substantially. So when we talk about training time integration, we typically understand that by using either training data that features terminology or terminology itself as a corpus to train machine translation systems that are customized. And the terminology, the empty system adherence to that terminology is ensured by the fact that we use the training data that comes from a customer that contains valid terminology. So there are pros for that method. So the NMT system learns to use in-domain terminology from examples, so the training data itself. So there's limited need for terminology management. So if you have parallel data, it already contains terminology, so you might not necessarily need terminology management. And you can use terminology if you have it as a parallel corpus. However, that method has deficiencies that there is no support for novel or altered terminology. So if your terminology changes, you have to retrain the whole system. And the method, when you add terminology as a corpus to the machine translation system's parallel data, so each term occurs only once in that term collection. However, when we train machine translation systems, we use millions of sentence pairs typically. So each single entry has does not have a lot of impact on the machine translation systems and quality. So by adding just the terminology to the parallel corpus may have a small increase in translation quality for that terminology itself. A different integration method is runtime integration, where we train a machine translation system separately without having the need for terminology, and then we plug the terminology in when we are starting to use the system. So this means that we don't need the terminology during training. We can exchange the terminology without any need to retrain the system. We don't need necessarily parallel data for that particular domain, so we can exchange or swap out term collections frequently and translate texts with different term collections specified as much as we want. And there's support for novel terminology, so these methods typically are able to translate also terminology that changes, is altered, or if new terminology appears. As with all methods, there's also a con or deficiencies with this method, so that this method highly depends on the exact methods that are applied in runtime integration. And I'll talk about three different methods further. There are quite a lot of different methods that have been developed by various MT providers. We also, as an MT provider, have been working on a couple of terminology integration methods. They work differently. So the three methods that I'll explain to you are automatic preprocessing for non-translatables, source-side annotation for terminology, and automatic post-editing. So most MT providers support automatic post-editing, some provide automatic preprocessing, and not so many provide support for source-side annotation. So how do they differ? So in automatic preprocessing, if we want to make sure that something is not translated or something always receives a specific translation, we can identify in the source text the phrase that needs not to be translated or translated in an exact target phrase, and replace that with a placeholder. So we train machine translation systems that are robust in handling placeholders for that. And when we translate a text with a placeholder, we just replace the placeholder back in the translation so that the non-translatable is not translated. So this is a very stable or reliable method for non-translatables. However, it can also impact quality on the surrounding context if the context depends on what within the placeholder was. So the next method is source-side annotation, where we train machine translation systems to be term aware. When we train machine translation systems, we prepare them with training data where phrases on the source side are annotated with translations in the target side, such that the machine translation system learns to copy the translation and also inflect that that phrase in the given context in the right inflection. So this means that we do not provide within those translations in the annotations the exact target inflections, but a lemmatized form, for instance, so that the system needs to make sure that it learns to both copy and inflect the terminology. So this is the most advanced and capable terminology integration method thus far. And we also believe that it will be a stable and reliable method going forward. And the last method is automatic post-editing, where after the translation, we check whether if there was a term or an untranslatable on the source side, is it correctly translated or not translated in the target side? If not, then we post-edit the translation such that the non-translatable or the terminology is translated correctly. So depending on which machine translation provider you choose or use and what their methods are, it may or may not support morphologically richer languages where you it's not enough to just replace words, but you need to make sure that the inflections are correct as well in the target language. And this automatic post-editing method also for neural machine translation systems depends on being able to link the source text or the phrase in the source text to the exact phrase in the target text. And that's not always that simple. It requires either external alignment models or neural machine translation systems trained to produce source to target alignments such that we can reliably replace the wrong translations with the correct translations. And since there is this dependence on alignment information, this method sometimes can also not work as expected. So it may replace something other than what we would have it to have replaced.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus, for this very detailed insights into the various methods that can be applied here, and that are surely new for most of our participants here. And when we've done all that to assure that terminology is translated the way we want it to, we want to test it, of course, in the end. And the usual way to test engines is BLEU, even for neural machine translation, although it is not the best possibility, because BLEU relies on the comparison of MT and reference translations on a lexical basis, and the amount of shared n-grams in these sentences. This is a whole topic for itself, but to sum it up, it's hard to check the correct translation with that method, with the BLEU metric. So if you want to get right or get sure that your terms are translated the right way, you have to go for human translation. A human evaluation. So that means the test sets that have been crafted before in order to test specific issues in the that pose problems for MT are tested here in the system. So what we do is we look at these specific issues, and we try to have a representative test set here that represents all the use cases and all the critical issues that may come with MT application here. And in order to have insights in the specific issue types here, you normally would do it in a specific system like this here. This is done in CONTENT-Quo, but you also can do it in other specific tools or in Excel, for example, if you want to do it. And what you can do here is to have a annotation of error types, and also a holistic evaluation. And this is based on scales. So you just rate whole sentences according to readability and accuracy. And this all in all, these informations gives you very detailed information about the suitability of your engines in the end. And also, if you do this analytic detailed evaluation, and you do it for a few hundred sentences, this is very valuable input for the MT provider, so he can optimize his engines according to your feedbacks. And feedbacks in general are very important, of course, for the provider to optimize your engines. So with that, we go to the challenge of data security.
Indeed, security is a very, very critical issue, and we face a lot of questions when we talk to our clients, questions about confidentiality, privacy of data, about how data can be stored, whereabout, and so on. And we can certainly say, if we move to the next slide, that we provide flexible deployment with complete data security. So there are two hosting options. One is cloud-based option, where data is processed within the European Union. And the second is, if companies prefer, on-premise solution can be also available, and everything is on your infrastructure behind your firewall. And what regards data sharing, all the data stays with you. It's not shared with anyone else. It's not used for any further training of any other MT engines. And what regards dynamic learning, for dynamic learning or adaptive MT, your post edits are stored in your private translation memory. And integration is last but not least challenge, and why it's important, because companies do like to have added value all across wider company when integrating MT in the workflows. And the questions we receive from companies: what are the integration options? Does MT integrate in my workflows? Can integration be customized? And many other questions. And in the next slide, I will talk you through briefly the options which Tilde machine translation can provide. So we can provide a web translation platform which enables text translation, document translation, and here I want to mention that there is a wide range of documents which can be translated, including all the Office format documents, PDF documents which we launched recently, as well as all the specialist documents translators and other workflows use. A lot of information is, of course, around us, available online and available in different languages. And we also need to make sure that this is content we also can read and understand. So the web translation platform can also translate websites for you, so that you can also understand information around you, which is available online. And web translation platform also consists of Tilde online cut tool, which is simplified cut tool for every user who works with documents and translates lots of documents and needs efficient but simple tool to do so. Moving forward, if companies want to use MT in providing multilingual information online, for example, have a multilingual website, have multilingual client portal. It's also possible by integrating MT into website, and all the content is automatically translated without any efforts and requests and work invested by translators, by marketing, and so on. Tilde MT also provides all the plugins for cut tools, which are used all across translation workflows. At the same time, we all use emails to communicate on everyday basis. We receive and send dozens and hundreds of emails constantly. So these emails also arrive in different languages and need to be sent in different languages. So machine translation can also enable automated translation of emails. With just a click of a button, you can translate incoming email into the language you comprehend, as well as you can write an email in your own language and with a click of a button, translate email into the language of the recipient. In that way, you communicate with your business partners, with your clients in the language they speak. And last but not least, we also provide custom integration because companies have different individual workflows and systems. So some might want to introduce MT into CMS system. Some companies want to have multilingual intranet so that company can efficiently communicate across the borders. Internally, in knowledge management systems, MT can be integrated in customer support, workflows, and many other.
Okay, thank you. So we come to the end of our webinar here, and to bring it just briefly together for you. So you've heard a lot around and about MT here. So there are lots of other details also to discuss and clarify in the process of MT integration, but don't be overwhelmed here. At BLC, we are dedicated to make things simple and understandable for you. And in order to implement the most suitable processes and systems on your side, we first talk about your specific requirements and use cases and bring together all the relevant stakeholders and specialists and user groups that are that need MT here. And so we will look at the suitability of your data for training MT engines, and we will clean it up so it will be ready to be used in the system. And we also will pass on our knowledge to you. And if you decided to work with Tilde for your MT requirements, you can be sure that translation to the MT solution, the transition to the MT solution will go smoothly here. And so we will work together here to provide the best solution for you.
Indeed, we can sum it up by saying combining the expertise BLC can provide you with, combined with all the technical solutions Tilde can develop, can make your company a winning company, staying ahead of the competition, being successful in growing internationally, in increasing efficiencies internally, and by having also improved and faster communication and information flow in the team, in the company, can grow efficiency, save time and money, and help you stay ahead of everyone in the industry.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Thank you very much for that very, very interesting webinar.